Hello and welcome to Tennessee Informer. Thank you for joining us tonight. Before we get to our guests this evening, I want to do a quick recap / commentary on our elections, especially the governor's race. Well, very disappointed that the only real conservative in the race, in the governor's race, Monty Fritz, did not win. But considering he only spent $350,000, he had a true all-volunteer grassroots team. He got 23% of the vote. You know, John Rose spent millions, and I think he got 32%. And then Marcia Blackburn spent millions more, and she got 42 or 43%, whatever it was. But almost 60% of the Republicans in Tennessee voted against Marcia, but she got the nomination. You know, it's disappointing. Now, I will say that, you know, I'd like to think that that means that we have almost 60% of the Republicans in our state that are conservative and constitutionally minded, but I really wouldn't say that. I really saw this with exceptions, because there is an exception to pretty much every rule. Both the Blackburn team and the Rose team are basically establishment rhino types, you know, that just had, you know, they're just pushing for different people, but there's not a whole lot of difference in the two teams overall. Monty was the only real constitutional conservative in the race and did a great job with, like I say, all volunteers and I think $350,000, and he got 23% of the vote. So, you know, we are proud of that, but disappointed at the same time. We did not have, it was not a good day overall for conservatives in Tennessee. We lost Andy Ogles. He was probably the best guy we have at the Capitol level, at the federal level. I don't agree with all of his votes by any means, but he was still probably the best we had. We did have a victory at the state level out in District 1. Jennifer Means did take out John Crawford, a long-term incumbent out in East Tennessee. Michelle Renault retained her position, so those are two solid conservatives. And we did retain at least some of the conservatives on the SEC. We did keep Chris Morris and others. We did lose one. We lost Cindy Miller. So it was a rough day all in all. We'll just have to see how everything turns out. It's going to be hard for Marcia because you know what? There's a lot of us that are just not going to vote for her. We're not going to do the Charlie Brown thing and you know let her just expect our support. Now I will make it clear, and Monty even said this: we don't need to go blue by voting for Jerry Green, the commie Dem that's running, or we don't need to go pinker in Tennessee by voting for Miss Pinkston. So there might be a decent independent out there. I wouldn't throw anybody's name out there yet. That's what I'll be looking at, is an independent that I can vote for, and I'm sure a lot of other people will be doing that as well. They really underestimated how much contempt and disgust just among Republicans there is for Marcia. So hey, they brought this on themselves. It's probably going to be closer. I think Marcia will still win. I don't think our state will elect a Democrat governor. I hope not. Although we still have a Republican supermajority, and we've had a Republican supermajority for a long time. Still can't get anything done, but we do have a Republican supermajority. And interesting enough, I remember at an event that Monty was at, that one of the representatives told me that if Monty won, that the legislature, and I'm paraphrasing here, you know, they don't support him, they won't support him, they will stop him, and that he won't get anything done. And that's a paraphrase, not exactly how it was said, but they were going to block him, the legislature. So, you know, they may end up having to do that. We'll see if they're willing to do that if we end up with the Democrat governor, or if they'll say the old thing they always tell us, well, hey, you know, it's the governor, nothing we can do. We can't buck the governor. So we'll see how that turns out. Anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about politics later on in this show. But just like I would suggest, don't jump on board of any independent without thoroughly checking them out. A lot of independents are really just Dems. And so if you're going to vote for an independent, make sure they're solid. Not sure there's one out there. And definitely don't vote for a Democrat. Our guest tonight is Lieutenant Colonel retired Edwin Kennedy from West Point class of 76, joining us to talk about the problem of woke at West Point, who pushed it, how deep it goes, and what is being done to save the institution. But first, a word from our sponsor, LifeWave, a unique product that uses light reflection to activate the body's own natural energy, supporting healing, improving performance, and combating aging without drugs or stimulants. Check it out and we'll be right back.
Light, the energy of life itself. Since the beginning of time, light has sustained us, fueled our growth, and shaped the world. Even Einstein recognized that everything we are is made of light. But what if we could harness the light within us, not just to live, but to renew, restore, and rejuvenate? Introducing LifeWave X39, the first product in the world that activates stem cells using our body's own light. Backed by clinical research, multiple patents, and over 10 years of stem cell research, a revolutionary wearable light technology that unlocks the power of activating our own stem cells with a single, safe, affordable, non-transdermal patch that puts you back in control of how you look, feel, and perform. Unlike drugs or chemicals, X39 works naturally, awakening your body's ability to heal and thrive. It's time to unlock your full potential, restore your vitality, and embrace a healthier, more vibrant you.
Welcome back. Now to our guest, Lieutenant Colonel retired Edwin Kennedy. He's with us tonight. He was a member of the West Point class of 76. Hey, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thank you for inviting me, sir.
It's good to have you. Appreciate you taking the time. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
I grew up in a military family. My dad was a World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam veteran. He dragged us around the world. He's from Mississippi. That's where he entered the service in World War II as an enlisted sailor. When the war was over, he got into West Point. That's what got my interest. My dad had gone to West Point. He graduated in 1950 and immediately shipped off to Korea. And he served in Vietnam as an infantry officer in an infantry brigade. And I was just in high school when he came back. And a couple of months after he came back, I graduated. At 17, I convinced him to enlist me. So he dragged me down to the recruiting station, signed the papers, and I was off. And I eventually got into West Point and finished my career at 22 years of active service in 1997 and retired and went right back to working for the Army. I taught junior ROTC for 7 years, and then because of the shortage of officers, they were looking for retired officers to come back and teach at the Command and General Staff College, and I went back and taught there until I retired again. So I've been employed by the Army all my life, literally.
So there was an old MASH thing you may remember where the colonel said that he cut himself the other day and he bled khaki. You remember that one? So it's safe to say you bleed khaki.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. So today we're going to discuss information from your recent article, Killing Woke at West Point. It was published in the MacArthur Society, which I'm not familiar with the MacArthur Society. It was a great article, by the way. And tell us a little bit about the organization, if you could.
Well, a friend of mine got me interested in it about a year and a half ago. I hadn't heard of it. It's a relatively new organization. It came out in about 2020 as a response to all the woke leftism going on in the country and in the military. And a bunch of the graduates of West Point said, this is ridiculous what's going on at West Point. They went up for a visit and saw all this nonsense where they were teaching cadets CRT, DEI classes. the superintendent was backing these programs for all this woke nonsense. And they said, that's not what the military academy is for. Taxpayers don't pay taxes to have cadets taught communist doctrine and theory, which is what DEI and the CRT garbage is. So they organized and came up with this organization, called it the MacArthur Society, and it's going full bore. It is very involved with what's going on at West Point, much to the dismay of the hierarchy up there. The superintendents, the three-star generals, do not like us because what we do is we point out all this stuff that's wrong. And of course, Secretary of War Hegseth has been told what's wrong, and he has countered a lot of it by directing that they get rid of a lot of the DEI, CRT garbage. So we're not friends. That's not what the intent was. We weren't trying to be the enemies of West Point, but we wanted to save the taxpayers and the American public from this communist garbage that's going on up there and try to reverse the trend so that it gets back to teaching cadets how to be professional officers, not political officers.
Right, right. So the article covers a lot of ground, everything from Taliban Ty, which we can talk about him, and it mentions Soros, the SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, and I think we've got some slides on both of them. But so when did all this start, and how was it allowed?
That's a great question. I think it started slowly back in the late 1990s, but it gained speed under President Obama, who was no friend of the military. Right. And all these leftists started coming in there because the military academy started a program to hire civilian professors. Now, in the days I was a cadet, the days my dad was a cadet, going back to the founding of the academy, you could count the number of civilian professors on one hand. But they opened the floodgates, and about 25% of the faculty became professors who were civilians. And they opened the door to all these people who, in normal universities and colleges, would have gotten by without a blink because they're so far to the left. But at the military academy, this is unacceptable. They let these guys get in, and they began slowly but surely inculcating their views, not only into the cadets, but into the permanent faculty, the military faculty, and the temporary faculty that came to teach there. Now, not all of them drank the Kool-Aid.
Right.
But this was allowed by the hierarchy. The superintendents, who were the 3 stars, are political.
Who did they answer to? Who did the 3 stars at West Point answer to?
They answer to the Undersecretary for Manpower in the Department of War, and eventually to the Department of War. So in order to follow the lead of the politicians who wanted them to become more liberal, they let these civilian professors in who were not vetted. And I can tell you the consequences when we get around to it in a minute or two of what happens when you don't vet these people. But they began changing the complexion of the military academy. And it went from being strictly military to being involved in this CRT DEI garbage starting about 2020, when it picked up a lot of speed under President Biden.
So now, Ty Sedgwill, retired supposedly brigadier general, but as this article exposes, there's a caveat to that, I guess you could say. Let's talk about him a little bit. Was he influenced by these civilian employees, or was he just left wing on his own? And if we could pull the slide up on him, there we go.
Yeah, I think he was probably left wing on his own, but he was following the lead of the superintendents who were leftist oriented. This slide here on Southern Poverty Law Center, I was going to get to, but let's hook that into him right now. The Southern Poverty Law Center has been recently indicted by the Department of Justice for funding the very organizations they claim to fight against.
Yep.
So the KKK has been getting funded by the Southern Poverty Law Center, who makes millions of dollars taking money from corporations and individuals by saying they fight racism and white supremacists. Yet they are under the table funding these very groups to keep them going. And that's what the Department of Justice is going after them for. And you say, well, what does that have to do with Ty Segall? All the universities and colleges in the United States for years were getting pumped with SPLC literature.
Right.
A lot of it went to the administrations, but it apparently was targeted at their law enforcement on campus, their police force or their security people. And it had these slick 3-page trifold brochures that said, look for these organizations. They are racist and white supremacist. And okay, they did get some of the right ones in there, but then they began sliming all these conservative groups that were not racist and not white supremacists, but they didn't fall into line with the SPLC's very liberal left-wing policies on abortion and anti-Christian doctrine.
Right.
So there's no doubt in my mind that Segall, who got to the academy in the late 90s as an instructor to teach history, was influenced by the SPLC. And the reason I say that is because if you look at his talking points, they are virtually identical to the ones the SPLC proposes. I mean, it's like he's reading off their crib sheet. So he stayed on faculty until 2013. He was teaching in the classroom as a professor. Then the head of the history department was relieved for sexual misconduct. And they kicked the guy out and put Segall in his place. And then he had a chance to impact the academy. So using the SPLC stuff is what I believe he did. He began influencing what was being taught at the academy. Now, if you go to the MacArthur Society website, there's a little banner across the top. It says articles and news. If you hit that and go down, there's a number of excellent articles that are updated every 3 or 4 days. But one of those articles in there it is in the middle of that maroon colored band. It says news and articles about halfway across to the right. You go into that and there's a bunch of great articles about how Segall was pumping these leftist history books into the academy. And all of a sudden in the mid 2010 timeframe, you start getting his influence on the cadets, and he's pushing this stuff to them. And interestingly enough, in 2015, both the FBI and the Department of Defense at the time were being advised by the SPLC. But they both, even under very liberal conditions in the government, they finally said, this is not right. We see the light. And they flushed the SPLC as a advisory group to both the FBI and the DOD. The problem is the damage had been done for over a decade of them pumping all their leftist literature into the military schools.
Yeah, you just don't flip a switch and all of that is gone. I mean, it just doesn't work that way.
Exactly. And a lot of these people had drunk the Kool-Aid for so long, they were what we call true believers. And so Segall, in 2015, went on a major video broadcast run by Dennis Prager, PragerU. and he made 2 videos. So the same year that the DOD and the FBI trashed the SPLC, essentially Sedgwick became their talking head, and in uniform, without permission of the military academy, and the PAO has given us the information on this, said he did not have permission to wear that uniform. This is from his talk to PragerU. He did not have permission to go on there and talk about the subject of Robert E. Lee, nor did he have permission to wear his uniform and represent himself as an official spokesman for the military academy or the U.S. Army.
How did he get the name Taliban Thai?
Friend of mine gave him that title. And what we were referring to is when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, they went out and blew up a lot of the cultural monuments. And you remember on the side of the mountains, they had those Buddhist monuments. Those were protected by the World Historical something or another. I can't remember. They're protected. They went out and they said, we don't care. They blew them up. And so we call him Taliban Thai because he was doing the same thing. He was attacking Confederate memorials and monuments around the U.S., but he was responsible for the Reconciliation Plaza at West Point being sanitized and all references to the Confederates being removed.
Now,
and this beautiful memorial was paid for by the class of 1961. It was installed in 2021, and he went after it. So then he spoke about Robert E. Lee on the video that was put out by PragerU, and it's widely criticized by a number of legitimate historians. And in 2021, he went and published his book on the talk that he gave, and the book's title is Robert E. Lee and Me. And he used that specifically to target Confederate memorials and monuments around the United States, but he really went after the Reconciliation Memorial in Arlington, which we've talked about before, but that quote you just showed comes out of his book that shows that he was really after that memorial. And that memorial was torn down at the behest of the naming commission, which he got himself appointed to. So there were 8 members. He got himself voted as the, I'm trying to think of the proper term, he was the deputy to the committee that he was serving on the naming commission. And he was advising the other members who had very little, if any, history knowledge about Confederate names and memorials. So the renaming commission was driven by Taliban Thai, who had this heartburn with anything Confederate.
Do we know where that came from? I mean, was that just something he's always felt, or was that SPLC propaganda? I mean, what do we know that? Do we know why he was so against Lee?
No, sir, I do not know. I think he gradually got a case of wokeness. He must have touched a dirty doorknob or something and caught wokeness, and he all of a sudden thought, to be in with all the academicians on the outside, he needed to be woke. And my former boss at the Army Command and General Staff College, when I was teaching in the graduate history department, was Colonel Jerry Morlock, who's PhD in history, graduated from West Point in '69, and he says that he thinks it's because Sedgwick was looking to ingratiate himself with all these woke professors so he'd get some work when he got out of West Point. That's all we can figure.
Okay. Now, I want to say something too. Think about that for the audience. The Reconciliation Memorial, put up in 1913, and this was, we're talking at the time in 1913, there were still veterans from that war on both sides, and this was a reconciliation memorial that they agreed to. I mean, that was something that, hey, we're putting this behind us, and we're all going forward as Americans, and yet he wanted to tear that down. That's disgusting.
Well, it's outrageous. The remit for the naming commission specifically says they were not to go into cemeteries. And for some reason or another, I think Reconciliation Memorial sits right in the middle of Arlington, which is a military cemetery. So not only did they break the remit they were given by Congress, they went after it because of a personal vendetta by this guy Sedgwick, who used his position and his rank to influence the other members of the commission to tell Lloyd Austin, they recommended to Lloyd Austin to take that memorial down. And Lloyd Austin, being a CRT DEI proponent, said, of course we will, because obviously Sedgwick knows what he's talking about because he's a historian.
Right.
So without getting any advice from or recommendations from the other side, they went in there and they ripped the memorial out.
Yeah. And they renamed all the bases, which some of them have been renamed back to the original name, though not after the original person. So, like Fort Bragg is Fort Bragg again, but it's not named after Braxton Bragg. Fort Gordon is some other Gordon that nobody knew. I mean, it's ridiculous that we've done that. And
it cost the taxpayers millions. The original estimate to change the names was $63 million. And, I guess to them that's nothing. But to me, as a taxpayer, that is incredible that they would waste the money to rename those locations after they had been given the names with the advice and consent of the U.S. military back at the turn of the century as part of reconciliation. Yep. So not only did he go after the Reconciliation Memorial in Arlington, he went after the beautiful Reconciliation Plaza at West Point without regard to the fact the class that donated it had voted to donate that. And oh, by the way, they weren't all Southerners. They honored men from both sides who had fought against each other in the war.
Now, how does George Soros tie into this?
Good question. He's probably tied in a lot deeper than we really know. But here's what happened when Sedgwick left the Army in 2020. He retired. As he walked out the door, the superintendent, Lieutenant General Williams, who was a hand-selected DEI CRT proponent, reached into his basket of goodies and he threw a Professor Emeritus award to Sedgwick and said, "You are poof, a Professor Emeritus." Well, that has all sorts of connotations that most people don't understand. It allows him certain academic freedoms, and he's able to come back. He's still able to influence things at West Point as a Professor Emeritus. It's a reward. It's an honorific. And one of the things that we're trying to do is encourage Secretary of War Hegseth to rescind that gratuitous award, take it away from him, because he goes around to speaking events and people say, oh, he must be a great guy. He's a Professor Emeritus. They wouldn't have done that unless he was an amazing professor. So he leaves the Army and he's out looking for a job. There's an organization called the Chamberlain Project. And they went and found Sedgwick and offered him a job. And he went to Hamilton College in New York, very liberal college. And the Chamberlain Project's goals are to recruit leftist Army officers to go to colleges and teach. And so they found Sedgwick and said, we'd like for you to go there. They must have made him a deal he couldn't refuse, because the research I did found that they are heavily funded by the Soros family. And so our man Sedgwill is taking his meal ticket, his paycheck, from the Soros family because they're the ones that picked these professors. And they are fondly nicknamed the Soros professors. And that's what this guy Sedgwill is. So you can draw certain conclusions from that and connect the dots. I don't see him waving his Communist Party membership card, but my gosh, if he's being paid by the Soroses, he belongs to a very liberal college and he's continuing this DEI CRT nonsense, then my thoughts are he walks like a communist, he quacks like a communist, he smells like a communist. He's probably pretty close to being one.
Yeah, you don't have to step on him to know that he's a communist then. What, now there's something about his rank that was in the article and we talked earlier. So let's just talk about his whole promotion to general. How did that come about?
Well, he spent years at West Point, not in the Army. And I have to default back to my old boss, Colonel Morlock, PhD, great guy, class of 69. He said, this guy lived the fat life at West Point for all those years. He took the place of the relieved history department chair because the guy was relieved, and he became the chair of the history department. So he stays there. He's promoted to full colonel because that's what the chairs are, full colonels. And he stays there until he retires. And then as he's walking out the door, General Williams reaches into his bag of Tootsie Rolls and he grabs some stars and he throws the stars at Ty Segel and says, "Poof, you are now a brigadier general. You don't get the pay, but we're going to promote you as you retire and call you a brigadier general." So he gets the rank. It's an honorific rank.
Right.
Most generals, ones I know of in the military, are competitive selections. You go before selection boards and you're selected, and then you are approved by Congress. So if you see a lot of these generals that are not at West Point, they are selected because of competitive assignments. They've been in the force. They've done great stuff. We hope that they're good, but some of them are not. We know because Secretary of War Hegseth has gotten rid of several because of their DEI CRT bent. But here's Ty Segel walking out as a colonel on the day he retires. They say, "Poof, you are now a brigadier general retired." So he didn't really earn the rank. It was given to him as a reward.
Okay. So you mentioned Secretary of Defense. You guys obviously have reached out to him, or somebody's reached out to him. He's aware of some of these things, right? So
Yes, sir.
What's being done?
Well, unfortunately, they don't consult with us.
Okay.
But we think just by some of the things that are happening, that they are actually paying attention and doing things behind the scenes. And it's probably just as well that we are not getting any kind of credit. We don't need the spotlight. We don't need the light put on us. We just want to make sure it gets done. So many of these recommendations, but at the same time, the deep state in the military is alive and well. And the MacArthur Society and STARS, which is another organization that is very closely aligned with the MacArthur Society. STARS represents the entire military, Air Force, Coast Guard, Navy, Marines, and the Army. MacArthur Society is just West Point. So we're a subsidiary of STARS, and STARS has turned in numerous requests for information to West Point, and they've been stonewalled by the deep state members up there. And I know how that happens because I tried to get information, and I got shuffled around to 4 different people who refused to answer my questions, and the 4th guy essentially said, "Look, there's a squirrel." And that's the end of the subject. He wouldn't tell me what I needed to know. So a number of FOIA requests have been turned in, and dozens of them have been totally ignored by the military academy. So they know we're coming after them. And what they're trying to do is stonewall us and keep us from getting the information we need to make decisions, to make recommendations.
So you would make the recommendations through STARS to the SecDef?
Exactly. And MacArthur Society, we have members that habitually go up to West Point and speak to the superintendents and try to get our influence through by talking they have town hall meetings.
Right.
And we also have a board of visitors, which is not very active. And the only person on that board of visitors that has actually done anything substantive that we can tell is, I'm having an Alzheimer's attack, Lieutenant General, help me out. He was working on President Trump's first election. Lieutenant
Flynn?
General Flynn, thank you.
Flynn, okay.
That was a hard one. So General Flynn has been very active on the Board of Visitors trying to get information, but he is very good. He goes up there, and we watched on the televised meetings that they finally started doing, that he was asking the right questions, going to get the information and putting them on the spot.
Good. And so so he's part of STARS as well?
No, but we're in tight with Flynn by communications.
Okay.
So we supply him information to use at these Board of Visitor meetings.
And so so you think that Hegseth has gotten at least some of this information?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. So have you seen, what progress have you seen then?
Well, there's some things I'd rather not talk about.
That's fine.
Because the other guys might find out.
I got you.
And then try to submarine us on it.
I got you.
But we can see, and we also have people that work in Department of War that are giving us a little bitty feedbacks saying the information's getting to them. We think this is affecting the decisions. So we feel confident that the information we're providing is getting to the right people.
We don't necessarily get a lot of details, but it's obvious there's this difference of opinion between Hegseth and a lot of the active duty military, the generals and whatnot. And, we've seen some relieved. Is that mostly, you think, the DEI stuff? You think that's the biggest issue there, or is it a combination?
Well, the ones I've seen, the answer is yes. The ones I've seen. We had a commanding general at Redstone Arsenal, a 3-star, a couple of years ago, that was a big DEI proponent, and he was having an affair apparently with his XO, and he tried to in-run her name and get her put on the battalion command list. She had never even been considered. She didn't even pass the first wickets for consideration, but he went behind the curtains, did the 3-star handshakes to get her on that promotion list and be put on battalion command, which she was unqualified for according to the boards. And he got relieved. He was taken out of command, which is good.
Good.
Yep. Exactly.
So do you think Hegseth is doing a good job overall on this aspect at least?
Yes, sir, I do. The problem is we're facing the deep state. And like I said, my analogy is they're cutting the tops of the weeds off. And so we're getting rid of the faces of this DEI stuff, but we still have those that are embedded, the weeds, roots that I call them. The roots are down there. And in the article, I call sedula cancer. his cancer is spreading through the military by the cadets he taught
Yep.
and the people that he worked for him on faculty. Now, this Spencer Rapone fellow that we have the picture of right here,
Yep.
let me tell you the dots I connected on this. You may remember in 2016, this cadet, Spencer Rapone, graduated from the U.S. Military Academy. He was an open communist. He admitted it. And that is absolutely outrageous. The taxpayers paid for his 4 years of education. He was commissioned as a U.S. Army officer. He is an open communist. Think if we had had an open Nazi in 1935, graduated from West Point. This is outrageous. But here's the connections I made. In 2015, one of his instructors, a guy with a steel backbone named Lieutenant Colonel Robert Heffington, reported Rapone for putting Marxist and communist pages up on his Facebook or whatever he was using at the time. His social media is what they said.
Right.
And so he was putting all these rants, pro-communist, Marxist rants up. And Heffington had a run-in with him at the history department. And his report is on file at the MacArthur Society webpage. You can find it. You go there and under the search bar, type in Heffington, and it brings up his official report that he wrote in 2015. And he reported this guy Rapone for gross disrespect to him. And I read the report and I'm going, I cannot believe he was not stripped, whipped 40 lashes, and then shot at dawn. I can't believe he got away with what he did to Colonel Heffington. And Heffington reported it. It went through his boss, who was Sedgwick. His boss was the head of the history department. So Heffington wrote the report, and it went through Sedgwick. Now, people will say, to make excuses, well, Sedgwick was the academic department. The tactical department handles any kind of issues with cadets and misbehavior.
Right.
They discipline the cadets. But guess what? Sedgwick is a co-equal to the head of the tactical department. They're both 06s.
Right.
And Sedgwick just has to say, this is unacceptable behavior. He needs to be punished. And they would have dragged him out the gate behind a horse and then whipped him and shot him. But obviously Sedgwick protected him because nothing ever happened to him. And just a few months later, he graduated and he had that Che Guevara T-shirt under his dress coat.
What happened to him after he graduated? Was he eventually stripped?
He went off in the Army, and this hit the news about the time he was reporting to his unit. And West Point, rather than having a backbone and saying, you will not graduate from this military academy, you will repay all your education, which they have the ability to do. They can say you will pay back your education and you're kicked out with a less than honorable discharge. Instead of doing that, they kicked the can down the road. He went to the 10th Mountain Division and it hit the news. And only because of the negative publicity did they board this guy and send him packing with a less than honorable discharge from the Army. But he didn't pay back his education, which they should have done.
Yeah. Should have been a dishonorable discharge.
Absolutely.
And the fact that Sedgwick didn't automatically refer him to the right authority to do that, I mean, that's... Well, let me ask you this. At the time, whoever that person was, do you think they would have done anything?
I don't know who the person was at the time. I would hope so.
Right.
But there's no excuse for Sedgwick not following up and ensuring that something was done.
Right.
The disrespect was so gross. I mean, I read the report and my skin was crawling. I'm going, I can't believe a cadet would talk to a commissioned officer the way he did. In my time, he would have been, and in fact, they could have taken UCMJ action.
Oh yeah,
I mean, there's
absolutely.
cadet regulations and there's UCMJ. Cadets are under UCMJ. They could have done something.
Yeah. And so that was 2015, 2016 time frame. So that's 10 years, and it goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. Well, that's a long time. I mean, that's how many people, and even though this guy was booted out, how many people have been influenced by this left-wing garbage that coming out of West Point and other places? West Point's not the only one, but West Point is one of the last places you would expect this kind of garbage to happen.
Yeah. I mean, my father fought in 2 wars against communists, and here we are graduating them and giving them a commission. And General Caslin, who was the superintendent at the time, shame on him for allowing this guy Rapone to go out the gate with a commission. Shame on him.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this, and you may or may not know the answer to this. So obviously they're spending this additional time on DEI and CRT. Were they also cutting important classes in order to do all of that?
Yes, sir, absolutely were. One of the problems we find looking at the Academy as a MacArthur Society is they were cutting important classes to teach this DEI CRT stuff. And they cut back on key instruction in things cadets should have been learning and substituting DEI CRT. Now, a lot of that stuff has been suppressed and gone away because Secretary of War Hegseth, first thing he did when he came in, he said, get it out of there. But I think they've been slow walking.
Right.
And some of the stuff has been renamed
Yeah.
and hidden. And, it needs to be rooted out. And what they need to do is make an example of the 3-star generals who run the place. The one that just left was part of the problem. And they should have fired him. I'm not sure why Hegseth did not fire that superintendent. They have a brand new one as of about a week and a half ago.
What do you know? You know anything about him, the new guy?
No, sir. Nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to put out an order, but, if it's so ingrained in the institution, and if you don't have somebody there making sure that it's being fixed, being addressed, it's not going to be addressed. And you mentioned the name change. They do that in our state governments and even at the federal level. There's a program that, like, for instance, back in the day when, everybody figured out Common Core was a problem. Well, all the state did was they changed the name. They stopped using the name Common Core. They called it something else. Still the same garbage. So what, are you optimistic or too early to be optimistic that they're going to fix anything? I mean, we've only had 2 years of this administration. We've got 2 years left. Now, granted, we don't know what's going to happen in the midterms. So it's going to take, even 4 years would be just getting started. So what do you thought? Are you optimistic or not?
I'm optimistic if we can get another administration like this one that cares about important things and not this communist ideology that they're pushing. And of course, the military academies should be under the control of the government. We can't control everything that goes on in civilian institutions.
Right.
And they want to teach communist stuff. They're going to keep teaching it. We can defund them like they've done to some of these organizations like Harvard, take their money, hit them in the wallet where it really hurts. But the military academy, you don't expect that kind of stuff to go on. And unfortunately, we have a bunch of politically correct officers who think that's okay. At the end of 4 years of this administration, I hope we've weeded them all out. But Secretary of War Hegseth's doing a great job. We hope he keeps doing it. We just need the people that are his subordinates to support him and help get this embedded at the lower levels. And we take these generals out, we need to get the subordinates who are their minions, who were following their lead, get them retrained or get rid of them.
Yeah. Retrain or move them out for sure. Any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't hit that you want to hit?
Yeah, it's a shame that people don't understand the influence the SPLC has had, the negative influence they've had. For years, I saw them, giving this information to colleges and universities, and I'm sure, like I said, it probably got to West Point as well. And people didn't know any better. But now that they've been indicted and we have all this information coming out about the stuff they're doing that's not just illegal, it's immoral, it's unethical, and for them to be giving money to the KKK and stuff just so they can have an enemy to fight against is outrageous. Yeah. But that's what we're fighting against, and they've influenced the military. It's been over 10 years now since the military stopped using their products. But how many years did we have where people were using their products, and where are they today? They're senior officers, senior NCOs, they're Department of Defense civilians. We don't know how much influence they've had.
Yeah. You mentioned PragerU, that Sigil did a show with them. Have you guys reached out to PragerU to say, hey, look, you put some bad information out? Have you done that, and have you got any kind of reaction?
They refuse to talk to us. I've sent hard copy letters. Other people have sent letters and emails to them. We've really tried hard to get them to take these videos down based on the fact that the SPLC influence can be seen in the videos, but the fact that Sigil is a fake brigadier general and a fake professor emeritus, this guy, in my opinion, should not have those awards. They're fake for those reasons. But they've not responded to us, and I'm very sorry for that, because overall, generally, PragerU is known for being a conservative organization and putting out conservative news. But they've unfortunately drunk the Kool-Aid on this, and they refuse to even talk to us about it.
Yeah, and of course, and I haven't watched all of them, but I think they also have the PragerU and Glenn Beck, who has done some work with them, if I remember correctly. They buy into the whole Lincoln mythology. So I think that might be part of their hesitancy, because they would have to admit, well, we're telling you some total BS about other aspects of history as well.
Yeah, and I'm sorry Glenn Beck has gotten involved with them. Glenn Beck lost my support back in 2012 when he put out a video along with another gentleman who's an evangelical preacher and makes really good evangelical videos. But they came out, for some reason, they went together in 2012, partnered on this video to slime Nathan Forrest. Yep. And the stuff they put out was just total, complete lies. I mean, it was such bad history. I'm going, I cannot believe they would purport to put this on a video for people to look at. They made outrageous claims. And I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I used to use his videos years ago. He's a Christian historian.
David Barton?
Yes, David Barton. Yes. And I used his stuff years and years ago. And he got out. They pulled the saber that belonged to Forrest out. They must have borrowed it from the person who owns it. And they said this saber probably skinned black soldiers alive at Fort Pillow. That's what they said. I said, you have to be joking. There's not a single reported case of a black soldier being skinned alive at Fort Pillow. All you have to do is read the official reports. There's not and they just kept going, all these false allegations. And it's kind of like uh, the sharks in the water, they smell blood and they go after Forrest. They say, well, he must be a bad person because he did this. So therefore, he must have done all these other bad things.
Right.
And there's nothing worse than just making stuff up. And people believed it because it was Glenn Beck and David Barton. Shame on them.
Absolutely. And our military used to study not David Barton, Forrest, in terms of his tactics.
We studied the tactics. We didn't worry about, what the guy ate for breakfast, who his friends were,
Right.
what his background was.
Yep.
We studied him. When I took our students to Chickamauga Battlefield, we had a staff ride for the command and general staff officer, majors, and lieutenant colonels. And we took them to study the Battle of Chickamauga. But we did the whole campaign. We started in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and we spent 3 days riding the campaign route of the Union Army under General Rosecrans to get to Chickamauga, Georgia. And then we spent the last 2 days on the battlefield because it was a 2-day battle. And we walked the battlefield. And one of the generals that was there as a corps commander was Nathan Forrest. So how do you study this battle without studying these commanders? And that's what we asked the students to do. Study what the commanders did. And we assigned students to represent those commanders. And they studied them. They said, here's the decisions they made. Here's why we think they made those particular decisions. And here's why we think they were either good or bad.
Right, right, yeah.
And how do you study them if you don't consider the history of who actually was there? And one of my CGSC instructor colleagues who turned me in and got me fired, essentially, did it because I had a picture of the grandson of Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was an Army Air Force general in World War II, was killed leading a bomber group over Germany in 1943.
You got fired from that, and you were working where at the time?
Army's Command and General Staff College.
And you had a picture of Nathan Bedford Forrest's grandson, who served in the Army Air Corps and was killed in action.
Leading a bomber group. Now, what we were doing, I was teaching leadership in the leadership department. We had a case study that we ran, and the students watched the movie 12 O'Clock High, which is a classic film from 1949. It's used by corporations and the Air Force still to teach leadership. And so we used it in our leadership department. It's an Army Air Force general who has to make difficult decisions to fix these bomber groups that he's been put in charge of. And if you hadn't seen the movie, it's a classic. I love it. I've watched it like 1,000,000 times with my students. But what we did is I tried to show that we weren't stovepiping our instruction, that when you walked out of history class, that was for that classroom only, and you flush everything and walk into leadership. That we had a tie to leadership, and the tie went to our Chickamauga staff ride. I said, we're studying the grandson of this corps commander who was killed in combat leading bombers. The first general in the U.S. Army killed in combat in World War II. And I had a false allegation made against me. I can spend an hour talking about that, and that's what got me fired from my job.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
and if they wanted to tell the real story of a reconciliation story in reference to Forrest, his actions in support of the former slaves after the war. I mean, it's you talk about a case of, all right, hey guys, it's over. Let's everybody, do our best to get along, and that would be a case. But instead, he's been accused of things he didn't do. He's been just basically totally disrespected. He's been canceled, even here in the state of Tennessee, and it's disgraceful. But
Well, he took his slaves to war. He gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. Said, if you go with me, I'll free you at the end of the war. He said, if you stay here and we lose, you'll get your freedom anyway. They all signed up to go with him. At the end of the war, or near the end of the war, 18 months before the end of the war, he called them together. He said, men, he said, I might not live to give you your freedom. Here's your papers. You're free to go. Every one of them stuck with him until the end. Half of them went to work for him as freedmen after the war, paid freemen. They stuck with him. They didn't hate him. And at his funeral, thousands of black people turned out. He was highly thought of in the black community. Yep. He became a born-again Christian. He renounced what he did as a slave trader, but he wasn't an evil man that, guys like, this is the worst night for me. Guy Bill O'Reilly just wrote a book about evil people.
O'Reilly writes garbage. He writes garbage.
It's absolute garbage. It's entertainment. Whoever his staff was that did the work on that did him a great discredit. He was not. It's junk. Yeah. Junk history.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. Definitely have you back sometime, and appreciate what you do. And I hope we get some progress in this area.
I do too. Thank you very much for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. A little bit of political commentary for the night, unrelated. Mississippi appointed a Muslim hijab-wearing judge. Now, apparently, she had worked with the governor out there, Tate Reeves, Republican governor, and they appointed her to be a municipal judge. Republicans are clueless. I mean, we know the Democrats, the whole Red-Green Alliance, they're working with the Islamists because they hate us. Both of them hate us, and they want to destroy our country. But Republicans are clueless when they do this kind of garbage. And of course, that's not the first southern state to suck up to Muslims. Tennessee has been doing it for a while. Bill Haslam, when he was the governor, he appointed Samar Ali, a known expert in Sharia-compliant finance, appointed her to be the head of the International Committee for, get the right title here. She was basically working in the, under Bill Hagerty, she was working in the economic development branch for foreign investment, but she was a known expert in Sharia-compliant finance, and her dad was on one of the founders of the Jerusalem Fund, which is all into BDS, and it had some very bad characters speak at their. I'm talking about Islamic terrorist type characters speak at their events. So she was a known. We knew these things, and yet he appointed her, and of course he defended it. Bill Hagerty, our senator, defended her, said everybody that was complaining about it was just a bigot. And of course, good old Steve Gill called her the good old girl from Waverly, saying, no, she's good. She's fine. She's one of us. These people don't get it. Bill Lee, one of the first groups he met with when he came into office was AMAC, American Muslim Advisory Council, which that was a group that was formed in the Haslam administration, and actually there were some Haslam administration members who were regular attendees at that meeting. I want to say that somebody from the DHS was involved, and they were pushing back against the legislation. The AMAC was formed to push back against legislation on a terrorism material support bill. So our state is clueless. Our leaders are the Republican establishment in Tennessee is clueless. Apparently, they're clueless in Mississippi as well. Now, in Tennessee, only Monty Fritz and Andy Ogles seem to understand the threat. Now, neither one of them. Monty was not elected. He's not running again at the state level. Andy Ogles lost his primary bid. They really are the only two that seem to get that it's a threat. at least in Tennessee, as far as elected officials go. And of course, we always hear, well, Islam's a religion, they got a right to practice. Is Islam even a religion? Who decides that it's a religion? Do you just get to say, I do this, I believe this, and that's my religion? Hey, you know what? When Monty said a couple of weeks ago, and this really caused an uproar with a lot of people, when he said that, he would do everything he could, legally, constitutionally could, to push back against the Islamist, then he was asked the question of, well, what about the First Amendment? And he correctly said, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. He said it's not a restriction on the state. Now, that, of course, made all the lawyers' heads explode. But do people understand how that First Amendment, which the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments, were passed to be restrictions on the federal government, not on the state government, because state governments already had their own Bill of Rights. And they weren't worried about the states violating, they were worried about the federal government violating the rights. So that's the whole reason we ended up with a Bill of Rights. So a couple things here. Those rights, especially anything having to do with religion, anything having to do with the Establishment Clause or the free exercise thereof, being applied to the states, didn't come about until the 1940s. And of course, they did it through the 14th Amendment, which was passed in 1868 at the end of the Civil War. Guys, everything we hear, all of those rights that have been incorporated against us, First Amendment, Second, against the states, the Fourth, parts of the Fifth, the Sixth, and I believe the Eighth. The others, the Third and Seventh, haven't, and of course the Ninth and 10th haven't. But the idea that the federal government can now beat us over the head and make our states adhere to their definition of abiding by those amendments, that didn't happen in 1868. In fact, the courts after after the amendment was passed, you had several cases where they made it clear, no, the 14th Amendment did not do that. The courts on their own decided that they had the power to go back and say, well, the 14th Amendment, we're going to incorporate these rights against the states through the various clauses of the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment didn't authorize them to do that. Nothing in the Constitution authorizes them to do that. They created it all on their own. Now, back to the First Amendment. Everybody says, well, you got freedom of religion. Well, you do understand that since we've allowed the courts to take this power, which the Congress could fix that if they wanted to, because they could restrict all of their appellate jurisdiction if they wanted to. The court decides they have a criteria for determining if something is a religion. They already have that. They already have a criteria. So it's already the court deciding what meets the standard of a religion. So there is nothing to say that eventually the court couldn't say, hey, you know what, if your religion, if 80% of your religion is dedicated to how you treat people that are not of your religion, and oh, by the way, it's okay for you to kill them, rape them, steal from them, subjugate them, make them pay a special tax if they don't convert. Those things are okay. Those things are part of your so-called religion, which is not just a religion, it's a whole political ideology as well. So if, the court theoretically could do that. But I will say this, if we continue, as all the 50 states, if we continue to allow the Supreme Court to be the one who decides what a religion is, we are going to lose this battle with Islam. And don't think that we're not in a battle. Don't think we're not. They've made it pretty clear what they are here to do. The sad thing is, I have zero confidence that our federal government or our state government will do anything to protect us. Now, right now, they're using the political system. I mean, they're running for office, they're getting elected, they're taking over whole cities. We better wake up. Unfortunately, I don't think we can count on our states. I don't think we can count on our federal government. I think we're on our own. Hopefully we could find some sheriffs that have some sense. Not a lot of those. There's not a lot of any elected official out there that has much sense. But it's a threat, and we better figure it out quick. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to watch our program tonight. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Find and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Please join us again next week at 7 p.m. We will have another guest, or I'll maybe spend an hour or so talking about different political issues. Please take the time to check out our other shows brought to you by West Tennessee TV by going to myparistv.com. You can find the links to the Mike Weatherford Show and Sportscast with Jeremy Buckalow. Tomorrow night, Mike welcomes American Floyd, the ultimate Pink Floyd tribute band, live in the studio. Then next Sunday on Sportscast, Jeremy welcomes in the coaches of the Middle School Patriots, covering their development into successful high school athletes. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.